Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga Birth Babies, and today we're speaking with Laurel Beversdorf. Laurel is an international yoga educator and the creator of Yoga with Resistance Bands. Laurel has written for Yoga Journal, Shut Up and Yoga, and the Tune Up Fitness blog. And most recently, she is a new mother. I reached out to Laurel because I love her way of practicing. She started with pretty traditional focus of asana, and through her own exploration and play, she created Yoga with Resistance Bands, and I've tried some of it. I've seen some of her online work, and it's fantastic. And as I mentioned, she made that great shift into parenthood. And I love talking to yoga teachers that have made that transition. I like to hear how it's changed their perspective of teaching and yoga and their practice, and it was a fun part of the conversation. So I think you'll really enjoy that. Before we get to that conversation, just a few little things. I just want to share that we started our New York City teacher training, and an amazing group of people, and it's really off to a great start. We only have a few spots left for the Charlotte, North Carolina at Yoga One. That's in the late fall. And for the winter, we're going to be at Willow Street Yoga, and we're about halfway full for that one. I'm excited as well for that. I'm excited for all of them. And we're already registering people for the spring in New York City, and then we're back in the late spring at Richmond, Virginia at Yoga Source. So 5 opportunities, well, 4 at this point left to study with myself and Caprice. And even though I've been doing this for, I know it's somewhere at 13, 14 years, I just love what I learn from them. Not just what I teach the people, the students, but what I learn. Everyone comes with their own perspective of birth, their own background, and their own questions, their own interpretation. And I love hashing that out and hearing different perspectives and learning from that. So it's been a really fantastic experience. And then I'm re-releasing Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi pretty soon. And that is segueing into what I'm calling Who's Afraid of the Pregnant Yogi 2, or the official name is Teaching the Postnatal Student. I did a small workshop of it last summer, a few months ago in the city, and I was really amazed at the response. It was a full workshop, even some online people viewing. So I decided to flesh that out a little bit more and create another online course, Teaching the Postnatal Student. That should come out, I'm guessing, sometime in the winter. All right, what else? We are in our new space in New York City. It is incredible. I feel so blessed to be in that space, and I have such deep gratitude for the community who really supported us on this change. Not only did people literally help us with the move, there's one day that Rob Fitch is a fantastic photographer in the area, showed up and spent like 10 hours with us. And if it wasn't for him and my husband building stuff, I don't know where we would be in this process. So thanks, Rob. And we had teachers that showed up and help us move things. We still have some teachers. Thank you, Renee, for helping us organize our office. And then financially, our crowdfunding went beyond my wildest dreams. So thank you for those that supported us. I don't even have words to say how blessed I feel about this situation. Last little bit before we start to get into the interview, if you are enjoying this podcast and you're getting something from it and you think others will enjoy it too, please go to Apple Podcast, or is it Apple Podcast? Yeah, Apple Podcast, no longer iTunes, and share, leave a rating, leave a review, share your thoughts. It will really help other people find us. Or, of course, you're not listening to it on an Apple device. You can leave it a rating or review anywhere that you do listen. Okay, I've rambled, and now we're going to take a super quick break, and when we come back, you'll enjoy my conversation with Laurel.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper? A woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver. I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18 plus.
Every year for my kid's birthday, my mom makes them a photo album of the pictures I sent her throughout the year. And it's fantastic and really a win-win for everyone because I am particularly horrible about executing and organizing projects like this. Now, even though my mom's the one doing the work of making the album, I still have to get her the pictures. And as a busy working mom, sometimes I find that task overwhelming. But this year, I think things are going to be different because I found a free photo sharing app. It's called Family Album. With Family Album, it has been so easy to share photos. I decide who I want my photos shared with, and every time I upload a new picture, my invited guests get a notification that new memories have been added. No more texting pictures, no more trying to shove as many pictures into one email. It has become so streamlined. Organization's also incredibly easy with Family Album since it sorts the pictures by the month taken and tells me how old my kids are in each picture. So when I'm trying to get my mom pictures for the album, I can see, all right, I've got some in November, I've got some in December, I've got some in January. Organization's so much easier. I actually wish I had this app when I was pregnant so I could have watched my pregnancy evolve and seen how my belly grew. Instead of what I have is just some random pictures and actually not knowing where in my pregnancy I was. My kids also love Family Album because of the 1-second movie highlights. Every 3 months, a short video collage is created using the best photos and video clips I have shared. They love seeing themselves in these movies, and I love seeing how much they've changed in just 3 months. And Family Album also offers free, unlimited storage. I kid you not when I say I have over 5,000 pictures taking up storage on my phone and computer. By saving them on the Family Album app, I have freed up so much space on my devices, which has been a huge help. And did I mention all these great features and convenient photo sharing opportunities is completely free? Free. Family Album, you can find it through your favorite app store or search Family Album on Google. And remember, Family Album is all one word, so hurry up and go get this free app. Start sharing your memories with the people that you love.
Waiting on a tax return? Hopefully it ends up in your hands. Fraudulent tax returns due to identity theft increased by 30% in 2023. If you're in a bind this tax season, LifeLock can help. Our U.S.-based restoration specialists are experts dedicated to helping solve your identity theft issues. And all LifeLock plans are backed by the $1 Million Protection Package. So we'll reimburse you up to the limits of your plan if you lose money due to identity theft. Help protect your information this tax season with LifeLock. Save up to 25% your first year at LifeLock.com/aware.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Hi, Laurel. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to you. It's funny, I'm not sure if you realize this, but I remember going to one of your classes when you were doing hands-on adjustments during your teacher training. This must have been at Yoga Works on the Upper West Side. So in my brain, I was trying to figure it out maybe 12 or 14 years ago. How long ago did you do teacher training?
When I was a trainee.
Yeah, when you were doing hands-on adjustments in the train, I remember one class.
I was learning hands-on adjustments.
You were learning hands-on adjustments. So this was because that's how long ago I've been practicing
Was it a 200-hour or a 300-hour?
That I don't know. I just remember the room I was in and you.
Yeah.
So, and I'm
were you in the group with me?
No. You must have been in a class. I think it was a Friday night class.
Oh, and you were taking class.
And I was taking class as a student. And does this sound at all? I mean, of course you wouldn't remember the class, but do you remember doing hands-on adjustments in classes? Or I could be totally wrong.
I don't know, but I took my 200-hour in 2009. and I took my 300 hour in 2008. I don't remember. I remember you taking a Friday evening class that I subbed.
Oh, maybe that was it, because it was a Friday
Paula
evening.
Beversdorf. Yes, and it was the very first class that I taught at Yoga Works. And
That's
so I
probably what I'm
was
thinking of.
really excited and really nervous. And I taught like my best class, and I like rehearsed it 5 times in my
That must have been
apartment
at that
before I taught
Friday
it.
night class.
And I remember I knew you because I knew you were a regular student of Paula's, because I was a regular student of Paula's. And I knew you had like a really strong established practice. And I think I knew you were a teacher. And so I saw you were in the class, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, Deb's in the class. And then you actually complimented me after I taught, and like it made my year. I was like, wow. And you were like, I felt like the pace could have been a little bit faster.
Did I actually say that? Oh my, forgive me.
Well, you were referring to, I think I was over queuing.
Oh my God, that is so wrong of me to
I just said a million things that didn't need to be said, but it was the Chandra Namaskar, was the moon salute. And I were just commenting on the fact that like maybe it was a little bogged down with cues, I think is what I understood.
I cannot
Actually,
believe
like, was great
I
feedback.
did that.
But no, you were so encouraging. It came from like this place where I felt like you were just being like super supportive and encouraging. And like, I took to heart your feedback and was like, yeah, I think I can see why she would think that. And that's something that I can improve on. And honestly, like that was something I needed to hear, because I was cue-tastic. Just too many cues. So.
Well, we can even talk about that as we dig in, because I love talking to yoga teachers. Yeah, that I cannot believe I had the gall to comment on. Wow, where was my mind?
But I may have actually asked you. I don't remember.
Okay.
I remember feeling really positive and supportive, for sure.
Good. I'm really glad. That's actually, I was doing, I do online mentoring, and I was talking to my mentee yesterday, and one of the things is they send me 30 minutes of their teaching and I give feedback. And she was saying, she's like, I really like getting feedback. No one else gives feedback. I'm like, well, they should. Because I think we improve upon that. Like I like getting feedback from my students and my teacher trainees. So
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you in other industries, like you pay thousands of dollars for people to give you feedback by hiring consultants, right?
Right.
And then somehow, like when it comes to teaching, I feel like there's a little bit of a barrier or a hang up around it. And it's understandable, because I think there's a time and place for it. And it depends on the people, right? Exchanging it and their relationship and all of this. But feedback it's game changing, life changing when it's imparted in these ways that feel supportive and constructive and positive. But yeah.
I also think it's how it's given. In our teacher training, we give a lot of feedback, and both Caprice and I, who lead teacher training, come from a performance background. And I remember, when we would do a show or a tech or a rehearsal, the director gave us feedback, and it wasn't ever sugar coated, and it was just honest for the sake of the bigger picture. And that's how I've always given feedback. It's never personal. It's never, but at the same time, and maybe this is something we can also talk about how we, with teacher training, I don't do it, I'm not mean, but I'm direct. And I know sometimes that could be surprising in certain ways.
Yeah,
so
I think it is. And I don't know why it is within the context of teaching yoga. I'm not sure about other teaching, professions, but for sure, there is a little bit of this tiptoeing quality.
Yeah.
Right. I just keep everything really positive and
I don't subscribe to that, but
I don't either. But I have also seen how feedback, while, its intention was to be constructive and to provide like helpful, relay helpful information back to somebody about their teaching, that like it actually had the opposite effect. And so
I think it has
I'm not really
to be
sure what that's about. And I think that it's very complex, but
I definitely think it has to be given with a reason as to why, and then an explanation. But yeah, I definitely feel like yoga teachers, and I want to always have the feedback for my teaching because it makes us better. I find that when things are reflected back, it makes me pause and say, oh, why did I say that? Am I just in habit, or what's my reasoning? Well, anyway, I hadn't even really introduced everything. So we just went off on this tangent, which makes me, I love talking yoga. So, all right, Laurel. So you are here because you have really had an amazing trajectory of your teaching. I want to get into that. I want to talk about your resistance bands, but also, as we were talking about before we started, you are also how old's your daughter? One?
She's going to be 11 months on October 2nd. So her birthday's November 2nd. So we're coming up on 1 year.
So, and yeah, I feel like there's a lot of yoga teachers out there that are turning into parents. And I just want to talk about how that affects teaching. And I had Paula on the podcast. I think she must have been like a couple weeks before her third. And I think she had a fourth since then, if I'm correct. Yes. And how that changed her teaching. And I feel like parenthood and yoga, it's an interesting blend, and we throw in teaching. So I reached out, and I'm so glad that you're willing to talk to me about this whole yoga parenthood mesh.
Yes.
So let's start. Absolutely. Let's just talk a little bit about yourself and how you got started in teaching yoga.
Great. Yeah. I started teaching yoga after moving to New York City. Well, actually, that's not true. I actually started teaching yoga when I was a teaching assistant in college without any training at all, because I was in a BFA acting program. And as a teaching assistant, my job was to kind of get the freshmen BFAs warmed up for a movement class. And so I thought yoga was a great way to do that. And I had just started really like a couple of years prior practicing it myself. And I was mostly practicing to VHS tapes in my dorm rooms and apartment rooms and things like that. And then I moved to New York to pursue acting. And I was in a show, and one of the actors commented on how she really liked Yoga Works and was practicing there, and told me about a deal. And I went in, and one of the days that I went in to practice, because I signed up for the deal, one of my friends from college was actually working behind the desk. And so through that connection, I started working behind the desk. And then through working behind the desk, I sort of got to know the community and the teachers, and I took their trainings. And then it was kind of very quick from there that I was given classes on the schedule, and then very shortly after that promoted to teacher trainer, because there was at that time, for the way that the trainings were expanding and the company was expanding, there was this need for people who had been kind of brought up within the teacher training so that they would then be able to lead the trainings. But I really was actually a relatively new teacher when I started leading teacher trainings, which is interesting now to reflect back on that and see like sort of the pitfalls of that, but then also like, how at the time the yoga, what could I call it? The yoga scene, I guess, or the way that yoga was being taught. We were at a certain place collectively in our exposure and understanding, and so the places that I was going and leading trainings, I had something to teach them. I definitely did, but I definitely didn't bring with me, like with only about 3 years of teaching experience, crazy. I didn't bring with me the type of maturity that I think, well, that I certainly hope that I do now. So, or knowledge, or just, years of seeing the causes and effects of things. But I made up for that with unbound enthusiasms and energy.
That's how I feel about a lot of doulas. I remember starting off as a doula. I didn't know a ton, but I was like, I'm here and I'm going to give you everything I have. So tell me about your trajectory a little bit, because, so you started off, teaching as part of the college. And then, like you said, you had a really strong trajectory as a teacher trainer, but then things shifted. I know you started studying with Carrie and kind of your own exploration. Let's go into that.
Yeah. I started studying with Carrie actually, as a teacher trainer, as what I felt like was kind of a good step to take with regards to just improving my own practice and my
let's
own
say who
understanding of the
carries. We've
asanas.
actually talked about
Carrie
movement.
O'Worko.
Yes, who we both have loved and studied with.
Yes, and we've taken classes with her together before.
Yeah.
And so there was that. And then I would say, like, after that point, actually, I'd been teaching trainings and I had been practicing very dedicatedly, probably for, 7 years, 6-7 years. I started to have a lot of pain, hip pain and some shoulder and neck pain. And I started to question what it was that I was doing. And my first instinct was to try to fix what it was that I was doing in terms of like working on my alignment or working to, change up the postures that I was practicing. I tried eliminating certain types of postures. The standing poses, for example, were a category of poses that I practiced a lot. And taught a lot and were a big part of the teacher trainings I was leading. And I thought maybe those were contributing to my hip pain. And I like to call it sort of the process by which I tried to fix my pain was one in which it was mostly about eliminating loads and eliminating movement, like bad alignment or bad poses. And it didn't work. Movement elimination, load elimination, it didn't work. I still had pain. And around this time, I started to become involved with Yoga Tune-Up, and I took their teacher certification training and the therapy ball trainings, and I sort of took all of the immersions and became integrated, and then eventually was promoted to be able to teach their therapy ball training and their teacher certification training. And it was through Yoga Tune-Up really that I got exposure to people who weren't yoga teachers or who had since stopped teaching yoga, and to ideas and approaches that came from outside of what I call the echo chamber of yoga teaching. And every single movement modality is, when you stay within one modality, it becomes like an echo chamber a little bit, not just yoga. So I got in kind of wind of this idea that maybe it wasn't about, fixing my pain with, a little bit more yoga or asana or better asanas or better alignment in asanas, but rather it's about doing something completely different and stepping outside of asana, actually working to diversify how I was using my body completely. So I started lifting weights is one of the things that kind of came out of that. And I signed up for some sessions with a weight trainer, and I learned how to do things like deadlift and swing a kettlebell and back squats and pull-ups. And so, this is very different than my earlier approach, which was about movement elimination and load elimination. It was actually in exposing myself to more loads and different loads that I was able to feel so much better in my body, and then actually go back and do all the poses that I thought were causing me the pain in the first place, or, explore different alignment and different ways of approaching, being in poses. Cause I kind of let go of this idea then, through, additional studies in body science and sort of how bodies adapt and how tissues adapt. Like I realized that like there is no bad alignment. There are no bad positions. There are only, alignment and positions that we aren't prepared for or that we're overexposed to. And then on the other side of overexposure is usually underexposure, right? So what I had been doing a lot was taking up my time so that I wasn't doing all the other stuff that I needed to be doing. I was doing a lot of asana and I wasn't doing a lot of anything else. So now it's a little bit more balanced with regards to what I'm doing. And I feel really good. And I think I'm really fortunate to be able to say that too, because there's a lot of other reasons why somebody would have pain apart from just their movement practices, right? So I don't happen to be suffering for any of those other reasons as well. I've never had any like major accidents, and genetically, I don't have any things going on. And I had a normal birth and normal pregnancy. So I don't want to say this like I'm in charge of how good I feel. I'm not. Largely, I think it's because of being fortunate and being lucky to a certain extent. But I have to say that one of the biggest things that led me to feel now not in pain was recognizing that I needed to do more than just yoga, asana. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but it was for me.
I agree. My body, I do better for comfort level, for functionality when I mix things up. When I do, and I also find that when I don't put my asana practice as quote unquote exercise, I approach it in a different manner. So when I like to lift weights. I like to cycle. So when I focus on that, my intention for my asana practice is more playful and exploratory than feeding. Granted, I'm going to out myself as a little crazy body image mind. So if I don't use the asana practice to quiet that exercise mind, then I can approach it in a different manner. So I like the idea of balance. Plus, I think I can relate to in the fact that I'm very hypermobile. And if I don't find strength and stability, it's easy to overstretch and cause more pain. Like I had to learn how to control my whole SI joint situation. And that had to do with a lot of stability and strength, because I could easily exploit all my hypermobile joints.
Yeah. Same thing. I had some SI joint pain as well. And I found that it was the strength training that really helped.
So what led you into the whole resistance band? Because I've been playing with resistance bands for a while, kind of like in my basement, just kind of working them out in my asanas, and I like them. Yeah. My kids would be like, what are you doing? Tying yourself up with these things. And they'd like to play with them in a different manner. So talk to me a little bit about how you even found that. And it seems to be something that really resonates with you. And then what it offered to you in your practice, and what happened. I'm offering so many questions at once. And then when you do approach your practice without the bands, what kind of impression do you still have with it? Like you're used to using it. And then when you're not, tell me all about that.
Yeah. Well, I started to use bands in a class called a yoga class, actually like very early on at the beginning of my teaching career with Jason Ray Brown, who was Jason. He was really he was kind of
on many
of the
levels
curve with regards to how he was presenting asana. And he would use resistance bands in his classes. He talked a lot about the kind of discrepancy between pushing and pulling. And so he would use resistance bands in very targeted ways toward meeting the under-met needs of the body with regards to yoga. So if there's not a lot of pulling in asana, we're going to use these bands to do some pulling. And it made total sense, and it felt really good. And then, I don't know, I stopped practicing with Jason, and I think just kind of went separate directions. And with that, sort of wasn't thinking about resistance bands as much. And then when I started lifting weights again, actually my weight trainer, Elizabeth, had me using the bands as warm-up. And, we would do like different things like monster walks, which is a really common strength and conditioning move with a short band around your thighs. And then you walk sideways and it warms up your lateral hip muscles. And then we would do good mornings with a band around the base of the neck and the feet. And you would basically just do like a hip hinge to warm up the posterior chain and things like that. And I was like, right. Like I have these and I could be doing stuff with these. And the monster walks felt amazing because, as I said, like I did have some SI joint pain, and I found that those were actually immediately helpful with regards to like actually just immediately getting me out of pain would be to do some monster walks. It was kind of bizarre. It was amazing. So I just started I pulled out my resistance bands. I bought more resistance bands. And I started playing, and it was also around this time that Julia Pline was posting a lot about some of the resistance bands works that she was doing in the city. And then a couple of other teachers started to play. And like, it's been a combination of playing around at home, getting inspiration online, and continuing to sort of apply what I knew about lifting weights and strength training to it. But, we both studied with Carrie. Carrie is like an incredibly playful teacher who uses props in myriad ways and is always finding new ways in. And resistance bands became another prop, like a belt or a block or a blanket, that I could use to enhance sensory feedback within postures, not only to get strong and not only to contact those under-contacted regions that we don't necessarily strengthen as much in yoga, but also to make certain parts of my body more aware and able to feel more, and to have a completely new experience in the poses. And honestly, that's why I love using resistance bands more actually than strengthening, and more actually than, varying the load. It's actually less for it's less for therapeutic purposes. It's more really for aesthetic purposes. And when I say aesthetic, I'm not talking about what it looks like. I'm talking about what it feels like, the aesthetics of feeling, and that I'm very, very interested in that felt sense, that felt experience when I practice yoga. And that's actually the reason that I practice yoga, is to have a felt experience that is different, that feels nourishing and good, but that is different. And so that's why I love using props. That's why I love using blankets on the floor, sliding around, and blocks in different ways against the wall, and yoga belts and resistance bands and therapy balls, is because they actually give my practice, and as a teacher, I like to share this as well, they give my practice more felt variety with regards to what you feel and what you become more aware of, or what you can sense better. So the resistance bands can be used in literally an infinite number of ways to do that, in addition to making you stronger, in addition to helping kind of target those blind spots. So I see creatively so much potential, and love playing and love sharing.
Yeah, and people really respect what you've done. You're teaching these all over the place, and I think it's great. I really like the idea that asana doesn't have to be presented in one way, that there can be so many kind of offshoots of asana. And I feel like that has changed in the last, I couldn't even put a cap number on it, but from when I started taking yoga back in, I'm going to date myself, I think 1996.
Yeah, old school.
Old school, very much. To now, things have there's chair yoga, there's a lot of stuff that Carrie does that's playful, there's resistant band. I think goat yoga is a little much, but that's just my that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea that we can step out of this is the lineage, and how can asana be explored, like the way we at Prenatal Yoga Center, the way we teach asana, that's just a tool for us to go deeper, and to learn about our bodies and learn about our thresholds. So I like that you're using the container of asana for exploration, especially with the resistance bands. It sounds a lot of fun. And I know that your experimentation of asana, there seems to be, and from what I listened to a lot of your other podcasts, I've been reading about stuff, your interpretation of cues, I'm guessing, might have shifted in terms of rules. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, with alignment, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So, someone commented on a post. I'm posting a lot, around this topic of alignment. Basically, that alignment has been confused with safety. And I felt like, I can't remember who said it, and I can't remember exactly what they wrote, but it was something like, we need to stop conflating alignment with safety. And I just think that it encapsulated so well what my experience had been, which was here I was in pain trying to fix my problem with alignment, when actually what my body and nervous system needed to feel safe had nothing to do with alignment, and everything to do with how I was loading my body, which includes alignment, of course, right? Geometry, pose geometry, position is a load parameter, but it is not the only factor. And, adding external load in the form of weights at the gym and resistance bands was excuse me, a much bigger piece of the puzzle that I had been missing. So I think we like to focus, on solving problems using the skills and strategies that we're really good at. I had become very good at teaching alignment. And so, of course, I have a problem. I'm going to pull out my trusty hammer that I've been using to try to fix it, right? Or whatever tool you want to equate alignment, instruct, and shoot, maybe not a hammer.
Bang that knee into place.
And it turns out it was the wrong tool, right? I needed to move and load in a different way. So how has my cueing changed? I think my cueing has changed. It's so much so, but not entirely, because I still lean on my oldest teachings, my oldest instruction. I mean, we all come from somewhere, and it's often our first exposure to a topic is the one that sits with us the longest. That's why teaching beginners is such a big deal, because you're teaching someone something for the first time, and it's probably going to have a big impact on how they are able to learn the thing going forward. So I do definitely utilize a lot of the cueing strategies that I've been using from the beginning. But in addition to that, I'd say my awareness has expanded to include what I would say maybe more education and information around how motor learning actually happens and the ways that we can use our cues to teach motor learning, and then also how positive adaptations in the body actually happen, right? Which is a part of motor learning, which sometimes has nothing to do with the position of the body, but rather the task that you've given the body to perform, which, we'll give our bodies a task to perform, and our bodies will work it out, right? They'll kind of already know sort of how to do that task, but it's in doing the task really that we load our bodies, and that we potentially improve the way our bodies adapt to those loads. So I definitely am not what I would say kind of giving TMI all the time, too much information, and saying less. So that's a big one. Providing an exercise or a pose, and imposing certain limits on it, right? So imposing some kind of challenge or task, but keeping it really simple how I cue that challenge or task so that it's doable and it's not overwhelming. And then taking that sort of same exercise or pose and kind of looking at it and approaching it in different ways. So maybe changing its orientation to gravity, maybe adding a different prop, maybe putting the band on in a different way. And so using repetition with a slight change to give students another go at it, but in a slightly different way. And so this is really much more in line, I think, with how we learn, right? It's just we learn through repetition, and an overload of information is detrimental to learning. So we have to keep our cues simple. And before, I think what I was doing is I was teaching. I wasn't teaching movement as much as I was giving enough information to people so that they would perform the pose in a particular way.
As opposed to embody it.
Yes. So that if they left and went home the next day and tried to do the thing that I was teaching them, they wouldn't be able to do it themselves, because they really needed me to give them all the cues to put them in the position to do the thing. And that's much more of a performance, right? Mm-hmm. So to really teach people motor learning that they can then go and sort of reproduce without you in the room. The approach is usually going to look a lot different than how trainees are typically taught to teach yoga in a teacher training. But teacher trainings are evolving rapidly, so I don't know. I'm not speaking for all teacher trainings for sure.
Well, I actually want to dip into that, because that's something I get very excited to talk about, is teacher trainings. I teach what I'd say like in an advanced level, because all our teacher trainees have to have a 200 hour under them. Because my thoughts are like, I'm teaching you to look at a pose and modify in many different ways for many things that come up. And if you don't have the foundation, how are you going to, it's like teaching your daughter who's probably figuring out a little standing and falling and standing and falling. Like you can't say like, go run, because she's just trying to take a few steps.
Right, so, exactly.
And it's interesting now that I'm teaching around the country, when I was just in New York, there was maybe 3 or 4 different schools that typically fed into mine. We've got a lot of yoga works. We had some sonic, we had some skyting. So I got a sense of what each school covered. But now that I'm teaching around the country, I'm seeing, I don't know if the disparity is the word, but difference in what people come out of a 200 hour with. So I'd love to dive into a little bit about teacher trainings.
Yeah.
And I'm going to edit my brain because sometimes I can get a little sharp about what I think's not being taught. So I'll try to be kind about that. But when you finish your teacher trainings, what are a couple of tools that you think new teachers really need to walk away with and integrate? Like if you could pick 3 tools or principles that you hope by the end of the 200 hour, they really can embody and teach.
Well, it depends on what the aim of the training is. And I've taught 200 hour, I've taught a professional program. I teach the yoga tune-up certification training, but for a 200 hour,
your foundational 200 hour.
I think that it's important from the sort of anatomy, maybe kinesiology is a better word for it, standpoint. Like, I think it's really important that students understand the major joints and the ways in which they can move, and to be able to name those directions of movement using technical language. Like, this is shoulder flexion, right? I'm showing an overhead position with the arms reaching up towards the ceiling, which is the hardest one to learn because it's really counterintuitive to how, that position of the shoulders is typically cued. But that's an example. Or anterior, posterior tilt of the pelvis. Those are kind of tricky to learn for 200-hour trainees. But I think that's really important because that's going to lay really the groundwork language-wise for them to then be able to continue their studies in learning anatomy and learning about the muscles and lots of things like that. That's one. 2 is I think it's important that they understand what are some of the more basic things that you may need to say about a particular posture or movement in order to get people moving toward that particular direction. That's largely trial and error, and that's largely a matter of just practicing teaching. But, we start off, at least in the Yoga Works 200 hour, with this really simple verb body part direction suggestion that, like, if you're going to cue, begin with the verb, followed by what body part you want to move or lift or reach or press down, and then a direction. And a direction could be up, down, left, right, or even better would be up toward the ceiling, down into the floor, out toward the windows, because that's, again, it's going to kind of speak a little bit more efficiently to the neuromotor system or the neuromuscular system with regards to motor learning. So to really orient the body and give it a task to do to the environment or to reach in a particular way that has to do with the external environment. But that's one that has to do mostly with, like, in the moment teaching of movement, teaching of asanas. And then the third one I think is sequencing is incredibly important, that trainees understand, what are the types of movements and ways of loading the body that make sense for the beginning of a class, what makes sense for the middle of the class, and what makes sense for the end before Shavasana.
Yeah, especially with the nervous system. I'm always surprised when I have our teacher trainees do a practice. I call it intelligent sequencing. Like, if you're cooling the nervous system down, a really big heating pose would not be appropriate, and breaking down. I want to jump back to the first one you said about the understanding the different movements. One thing that I see over and over again is, so in prenatal, we talk a lot about internal rotation, of the femur bones, because how the relationship to the SI and how we can start to lengthen actually some of the pelvic floor muscles with internal rotation depending on the position of the pelvis, which is kind of my jam, pelvic floor. And I'm actually surprised how many students come into our training not knowing the difference between internal and external rotation of the actual femur bones as opposed to spirals. Like, people are like, oh, we're internally spiraling the leg. I'm like, not the, what am I going to say? Like the intention or like the intention, but the actual gross movement. So if I can put out one of the things I would love to see teachers understand is when you're externally rotating the leg, the position the femur is moving in the hip, like in the acetabulum, like, and when you're internally rotating, it's a different position. Like we get a lot of people will say, I'll say, what's the back leg in Warrior One? And they'll say it's internally rotated. I said, well, maybe you're intentionally trying to internally rotate, but the leg itself, if you brought the leg forward from back to forward into a Tadasana, the toes are turned out. It is externally rotated. Right. Does that make sense where I'm going?
It does. Yeah. I mean, all of this kind of depends on what the pelvis is doing too, with regards to the joint's actual position. But I would say that, it can get even more basic, definitely, than the directions of movement and come down to like students having a fundamental understanding of what a joint is.
Yes.
Where a joint is actually, there is no joint. There are only a place where two or more bones meet, where movement happens. But unlike, it can't move on its own. A joint is like Chrissy Carter used this analogy once when she was teaching anatomy. I think I was observing her for the purpose of eventually teaching anatomy for 200 hours. And she said, a joint is like a nightclub. It can't dance on its own, right? It's a place. It's a place like a nightclub, but it can't dance on its own. So, but understanding that a joint is the place, it's the origin of movement. And then, of course, it's helpful to understand muscles are the tissues that create, or the organs that create movement. But there's so much. One of the things we love about yoga, I'll speak for myself. What I love about yoga is I love the esoterics of yoga. I love the beautiful analogies and metaphors that come out of the aesthetic experience that is the practice of yoga, and the way that many teachers have become very skilled at speaking to that aesthetic experience through metaphor and analogy. But we have to understand that when we're speaking that language, we're telling a type of truth. We're conveying a type of truth that's maybe revolving more around a sensory experience or an aesthetic experience. But like when it comes down to like the way that your hip can move, or the way that your pelvis can move, and the joints at which your pelvis can move, like there are directions, and they have specific names, and those directions of movement refer to the bones moving at the joints, and what are the joints, and what kind of joints are they, and how do they allow movement. Like this is all really good information to have. It's a lot for 200-hour trainings. It can be too much if too much information is presented. But I would start with, how can the joints move? First, what is a joint?
Yeah.
How can
I really wanted to harp on that, because I like that. I feel like sometimes 200-hour trainings have so much, you're coming in brand new eyed and you're like, I want to learn it all. And sometimes it can be almost over teaching, because if you only have the frosting and you don't have the cake, like, it's just too much. So
it can easily become too much. And that is, you definitely don't want it to become too much.
Yeah. You want to have that foundation.
Yeah, because then what students are learning is something completely different, which is like, oh, this is impossible. I can't do this.
Or they're just mimicking what they've heard, and you don't really even understand what they're saying.
Right.
I want to shift a little bit, because I watched through the love of social media, and you were so open and honest about. I watched your pregnancy and your, not your birth, but like the aftermath. And so, how did your practice change when pregnant?
I had already been lifting weights for about a year before I got pregnant, which I'm really happy and lucky, I think, that was the case. And I continued lifting weights all the way through my pregnancy. My daughter was 10 days late, and I was lifting weights 4 days before she was born.
Just get out.
So 6 days late. I was at the gym. And I decreased the weight a lot. Every week I was gaining 5 pounds. So I was maybe not increasing the amount of weight that I was actually lifting by a whole lot because my body was getting heavier. But the weight, the kettlebells and the barbells and the dumbbells that I was lifting, I decreased. And I used what my doctor told me, to kind of gauge my levels, which was like, just make sure that you can have a conversation. So I always made sure that I could have a conversation when I was doing cardio or when I was lifting weights. And if it became at all, got to a point where I started to feel at all like I couldn't or it was overwhelming, I backed off. And I'm pretty proud of myself for that because I tend to be a pusher. I tend to be a worker, and I tend to kind of take things too far to the point where I like work against myself a little bit. And in pregnancy, I didn't. I was pretty, and this is all relative, but according to me, I was pretty conservative. I know a lot of people saw me lifting the weight that I was, and they were like, wow, that's crazy. What are you doing? But I think that's in part, it's because you don't often see women who are pregnant at the gym lifting.
I was.
Yeah. And it's not,
and it felt great.
Not like common knowledge. Like a lot of people still are sort of operating under that old paradigm of like, you need to rest. Let me carry those groceries for you. And in some cases, like there are real, very good reasons why you would want to rest your entire pregnancy and not pick anything heavy up, because there are some pretty, serious precautions that certain women have to take. And
Absolutely.
I understand that too. So I was always, on social media, when I would post, I always tried to mention that, this is what I'm doing for me because of what my doctor has suggested or allowed based on the condition that, I'm in with regards to this pregnancy and even like this pregnancy, right? Like if I got pregnant again, I might not be able to do any of these things because it's a different pregnancy.
You were extremely mindful about that, really being, this is what works for me. Like I actually appreciated that, because then other people wouldn't compare, be like, oh, I should be doing that. And when I say like, I was also working out with weights, I had people come up telling me they were concerned about it. I'm like, got it under control, not hurting myself. Promise, I know. And when you were lifting weights, you have a really, I remember thinking, I wonder how her pelvic floor is. But then I thought, and then I thought, no, she knows her body, and you work so much with the pelvic floor. But I like that you were really clear. Yeah. I'm really intuitive with what's going on with my body. I'm just showing you my journey.
Yeah. And it wasn't even that I was like intuitive with what was going on with my body as much as like I had been lifting weights for a year before I got pregnant. I think that's really important. I think that it's possible that, it would be really beneficial for someone who is newly pregnant to start lifting weights, but I would definitely recommend getting a specialist weight trainer, who is, experienced in helping women who are pregnant lift weights, especially if you have a history of pain, and, definitely running this by your doctor before anything happens. Of course. I think that it's a little too fearful and protectionist to say like, oh, well, if you didn't do it before you were pregnant, now's not the time to start. For some things, I think that's true, like training for a marathon. But for something like lifting weights, like you're 9 months, 10 months without lifting anything heavy, come on, you're going to have to lift up some heavy stuff when you're pregnant.
Well, then the baby's after.
Right? And then there's the baby that you're going to have to lift up afterwards. And the car seat and all this, right? So I think that I went and saw a highly experienced weight trainer, and I wasn't pregnant, and I learned how to do some basic lifts and then practiced that for a year and then got pregnant. And then felt like I could continue to carry forward what I'd been learning. And at no point did I feel like I needed some, extra guidance because I wasn't having any negative repercussions. But had I started to have some aches and pains creep in that I thought maybe had to do with how I was lifting while pregnant, I would have definitely, again, sought out somebody. I'm fortunate to live in New York City where there's probably 100 highly qualified, amazing prenatal weight training specialists that I could somehow get, in front of. But I didn't have to do that because I actually felt really good. And I felt like the lifting weights, what I knew about it and how I was doing it was actually keeping me feeling really good.
So beyond the weights, what about your asana practice? I found during my first pregnancy, I'd go into the studio, or I was also practicing at Reebok, which is now Equinox at the time. And I'd sometimes just get a little room, and I felt like a cat. I just wanted to be on the floor and and just move. And I did a lot of spirally and hip, I don't know, my practice really changed. What about yours?
Yeah, I actually backed way off on certain postures. I didn't do any standing poses. I had no desire to do any passive
that's why I ended up on the floor. It's
movement was where it was for me too. But I really loved downward facing dog.
Feels so good in the back.
Up until 7 months, I think I was doing inversions, and they felt really good. I was surprised. But handstand L shape against the wall, even Pinchamayur asana. I love inversions. I've always loved inversions, but they felt really, really good.
My first pregnancy they
Around
did.
that time, I remember.
My second, I started pretty early on. Every time I went upside down, I just felt this massive heaviness in my head. And it's interesting, same body, different pregnancies.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you people, I only have one child, but you can see my brother's sons are so different. I mean, the pregnancies were different too,
So let's talk about now you're a parent. And you're a yoga teacher, and there's a different responsibility. You can't just be I'm going to teach all this. And you're but I have to take care of this child. So talk to me a little bit about how parenthood has changed your relationship to your yoga practice, as well as the trajectory of your career. I know that at one point you were looking to go to physical therapy school.
Yes. So I began, I think in 2016, taking prerequisites for physical therapy school. I had a lot to take because
you were an acting major.
Sure, fine arts acting major. So I had to take all of them basically, which was about 12 classes or 10 classes. And I did, and I completed all of them in time to apply for physical therapy school. And I applied and I interviewed and I was accepted, and I declined because I actually interviewed a few weeks after my daughter was born. And so I was sleep deprived and nothing fit
hormonal.
Me. And and super hormonal. But yeah, it was an exciting time. I kind of knew applying, though, because I applied pregnant, right? I knew that it was probably not going to be a go, but I wanted to apply anyway because I wanted to see, I kind of wanted to see what would happen. I was curious. I'd been working toward it for so long. But even when I started taking the prereqs, I kind of in the back of my head knew we were trying to get pregnant. I was like, we'll see how this all plays out. And it was after being a mom for a couple of weeks, I knew that there was no way that I wanted to take on PT school with my daughter being so young and with the demands of physical therapy school and everything, that would have to be sacrificed to be, to devote as much time and energy that I needed to both. Knew that I couldn't do both. So I gladly declined, and I'm waiting now to see when will be the right time to apply again. And it's not looking like it's going to be this year, maybe next year. But I have it all ready to go. That's the good news. I don't have to take physics anymore. Pregnant. So yeah, I got kind of the hardest part is over. People I've talked to who actually, went through physical therapy school have told me the hardest part is actually getting the prereqs out of the way.
Well, you got that done. That's good.
So that's done. But yeah, I also, where my career has sort of headed toward in the last couple of years too, that's another reason why I deferred or I decided not to go to PT school, which is that I was around 2016, I started to sort of see ahead a little further toward what my life as a yoga teacher might look like if I continued exactly along the path that I was on. And I didn't see that it would be sustainable. I didn't see that it would afford me enough of the types of freedom and resources that I would hope to have. And so I started to lay the groundwork for a career change or a career combination, right? So to kind of work in both capacities, but to have this additional revenue stream. And then, my career started to shift, and I started to do more stuff online, and I started to, position myself in more specific ways as a teacher, and so I'm really excited about the ways in which I've sort of carved out a little bit of a path, I would say. And I'm interested in pursuing it to see where else it goes. But I think PT would eventually be an excellent education to add and an excellent set of skills to add. I just don't know when that will. I don't know when that will be. But I've never known any of the things that I've ended up doing. I kind of don't. I'm not like a 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now type of a person. But I always have sort of ideas in my head, and I'm usually taking daily steps toward them. Mm-hmm. And then they change. Sometimes they change or they reorganize a little bit. But yeah, PT school's there. I just don't know when it's going to be buckled down and take PT school time.
How has your relationship to your practice changed now that you have your daughter? I'm guessing maybe you don't have... I remember I asked that question to Paula because I remember clearly she had her first when I was having my second. And I remember there was, and I'll even admit, a slight envy that before that, she's like, I get to practice twice a day and I do pranayama. And I'm like, if I can even just do a few pauses. And then when I had my talk with her before she had her third, she's like, oh yeah, that's so different. So now that you are a mother, timelines have changed, free time has changed. What's your practice look like now?
Well, I definitely have much more of a home practice, and I protect it much more devotedly than I ever did. In fact, I was always somebody who struggled with a home practice because I really preferred to practice with other people in a class, and I preferred to take group classes. But I can't do that as much because I'm home with my daughter much more. But what the cool thing is that actually now, like when I decide like during this nap, I'm going to practice, I do. Because I know, like...
That's it. That's your time.
There isn't going to be a later on. Or a tomorrow, maybe, right? Depending on what's going on. So, like, this is it. This is what I've chunked out for myself. And I savor it, too. I savor it not just because I have these new creaky kind of, mom-type aches and pains from time to time, but also that... it feels so good to have that time alone with quiet. And, my daughter's young. She's taking 2 naps now. So I still have the luxury of like a morning or afternoon option. But I have to say it's actually enhanced my relationship to my home practice.
That's great. That is really great. Because if you can't get out and you still want your practice, it's, honor what you have in front of you and go with it.
Well, also like, now that you asked me this question, one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about is that when I had this sort of, what I would say sort of like on again, off again relationship with my home practice before I got pregnant, a lot of that was around my ideas about what I should be doing in my home practice and how those shoulds were barriers to me actually doing what I wanted to do. And so I had these ideas about what my home practice should look like. And I was kind of shitting on myself, as my mother would say. And kind of creating this like feeling of like, I don't want to do what you tell me to do. I want to do my own thing, like inside to myself. And then on the other hand, I'm kind of telling myself like, no, Laurel, what you really should do is you should really focus on these series of poses and, make sure you take a 20-minute shavasana and do some pranayama and all these things that I thought that a home practice should be about. And I let that go. I let that go when I started to practice other interpretations of yoga and also other movement modalities and recognize that like, I'm just going to move, man. I'm going to move in some ways that feel good. I'm going to move in some ways that I'm curious to move in. I'm going to move in some ways that like I've seen other people move and I want to try it out. And then now it's like playtime. It's like, oh, I'm going to do my home practice. I have no idea what it's going to look like. And that's okay. And it's whatever it is good.
When and I'm not a great home practicer, but when I do, or especially when my first was little and I did the whole nap time thing too, because that was it. Like that was the only time. Mm-hmm. I let go of, I'm a yoga teacher. If I was teaching a class, I'd start with this. And it's kind of like when I was a singer, I'm like, okay, I didn't love warm-ups, but they were to get my body ready for the songs. And I let go of the rules. Okay, now we're going to do some sun salutations to warm up. And it sounds like a similar path. Like I gave myself the permission to be like, what do you want to do? Because I had a conversation in my head and I still very much remember this. Like, Deb, you don't have that much time to yourself. Let this be about your experience on the mat, not what you would teach another class. And then sometimes I came up with things I'm like, oh, I do want to slide this into a class. But I had to give myself that permission that it wasn't work, but it was my time because I likely wasn't having any other time except maybe a shower that day to myself. Even that probably wasn't by myself. I probably had someone like had my baby like right there or something or in the shower with me in case if I couldn't find another time.
Yeah. All of these sort of self-imposed limitations about what we should be doing, or, we just can't take off the caretaker hat. Like even when we're practicing, we're thinking about our students and what they need. Mm-hmm. It's like maybe the home practice is really learning to take care of ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe that's really what we're learning. And that's really what I was learning. And I still fall into, habits of thought about like, ooh, maybe I'll plan my workshop, or, ooh, maybe I'll think about how this could work into a class, or, that kind of mentality where like, it's not my practice anymore. It's my students' practice all of a sudden. Right. But when my practice is really working for me, it's, it resists those habits of what I would say are kind of like how can I kind of use this time to work habits rather than use this time to rest or play or just enjoy.
Yeah, because I think the practice should be about enjoying. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'm going to ask you for one tip or piece of advice, and I'm going to give you two options. You would like to either offer, because I feel like we're straddling two worlds here, either new yoga teachers or new or expectant parents. So marinate with that for a moment, and we'll be right back.
Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Coincidence? I think not. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere, even at 30,000 feet. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Okay. Which direction are you going? What tip or piece of advice for either a new teacher or new expectant parent?
Well, no one's ever asked me the second question, so definitely I want to give that advice.
All right.
Because I've never been asked. So I will give the advice that I received that I found very helpful as a brand new parent, which was that you should go with your gut. and trust yourself. And if something doesn't feel like it's working for you or your baby or your partner or all of you together or your other children, then don't feel like you have to adhere without taking into account, how it's affecting your unique kind of microcosm of experience and family. So this was, really amazing advice that I heard from a number of parents, from a number of my friends and family members, that there are wrong ways to parent. Don't get me wrong. But there are so many right ways. And not all of the right ways are written down in the apps and blogs and even advice given by your pediatrician. I got advice from my pediatrician that I did not take. And it had to do with, time between feedings and, whether or not to wake up the baby and things like that. And I kept an eye on the effects of the decisions that I was making, but I sort of was like, I don't think that that's what's best for us right now. So I'm going to do it this other way. My mother-in-law was, especially encouraging too with this type of thing too. And she came and stayed with me for a couple of weeks and would constantly reinforce this idea that you know what, maybe that's not the way. And maybe you can do it this other way that you want to do it and see how it goes. So there's just a lot of, and the reason I feel like this was really good advice for me is I'm very much the kind of person who really wants to do things the right way and not make mistakes. Not mess up. So it was helpful for me to understand that there are going to be so many right ways to do it. And I could just choose the way that felt right to me and see how it goes. That's, obviously not just a blanket statement, just do what feels right, because I do really very much believe in taking advice of your doctor and, making decisions according to research and things like that. But there's a lot of wiggle room. There's a lot of wiggle room. And so much of what I think we're, whether consciously or unconsciously, made to feel as new parents. And we went through a couple months of pregnancy, 9, 10, however many, 8 months of pregnancy, maybe feeling this as well as fear of not doing it right, fear of messing your kid up. So to combat that, I also, another piece of advice is anytime someone tried to give me advice that I felt like was coming from a place of fearfulness, or, either they were projecting onto me their own fears about me or their own past experiences, or just using kind of fearful ways of advising me to do certain things, I would just not take the advice at all. I would just sort of let it go in one ear and out the other. Because I felt like if it was coming from that place, it was already wrong. It was already not good advice. So those two things, there's lots of right ways to parent. There's lots of right ways to do things. And if it feels like you're being kind of made to feel afraid, maybe there's someone else you want to go to get your advice from.
Oh, I love all of that. I think that can actually also apply to teachers.
Yeah,
well, this is really good. All right. Yeah. You have so much work you're doing between your online, your yoga teacher trainings, your workshops. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, my website, laurelbeversdorf.com. And I'm really active on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook, but I'm much, much more on Instagram. My handle is @laurelbeversdorf.
That's straightforward. Okay.
Yeah,
I'll make sure, of course, it's in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to say before we start to wrap up?
Well, only that this has been a great pleasure talking to you, Deb. And I feel so honored that you had me on your podcast, and I've known of you and admired you for a long time, and we've shared some classes together. And anyway, I just think this is so special. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Go enjoy your day. Go see your daughter.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, you know, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.